Okay, I think we should start. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Alejandro Jara. I am attending from Santiago, Chile. And I am a member of the Punta del Este Group, and we've been holding interviews with the candidates to become the next Director General of WTO. And the Minister of Saudi Arabia has very kindly consented to join us today for the next hour in order to make a presentation and answer questions we may have. The Punta del Este Group is an independent network of a few friends that we decided to group to undertake analysis and to advocate ideas to defend and thus to reform the WTO, the multilateral trading system, and to enhance awareness of the problems and the need for movement in WTO throughout Latin America in particular. So I would like to again reiterate my warm welcome to Mohammed, His Excellency, the Minister of Saudi Arabia. The minister, he is the minister that advising the Royal Court on international and economic strategic work. Until this year, he was also the Minister of Economy and Planning. He has a very long career in banking. The minister holds an MBA and also Bachelor of Sciences Aeronautics. So that's very interesting, a very interesting skill, Minister, that you bring, because maybe you can be decisive in order to help the WTO plane take off and have a smooth flight. First of all, I'll give the floor to the Minister for a presentation of 15-20 minutes. And I have to remind you that any questions should be put to us through the chat. And we trust that in this presentation, the Minister will first address on his views on how to restore the trust and to recover a normal functioning of the WTO, the multilateral trading system. And in that context, what is the message you bring to Latin American countries? So, Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And while you speak, I actually feel that the world needs many units, organizations like you, because this era of our humanity is very difficult, very uncertain, very unpredictable. And, you know, from a even risk point of view, I think we're entering into a very, very negative territory. Whether I look at the geopolitical tensions, I look at the uncertainty in the markets, I look at COVID-19 and how we will recover, what sort of opening up we can do. So I really thank you for, you know, taking this responsibility to make a difference in the world and your very important region. So I'm very happy today to speak to you. This is my very deep feeling. Second, if I may give you a little bit of background to say why a Saudi candidate at this point of time and what can he bring to the organization with this very difficult job, very difficult organization, very difficult environment. My kids told me, you're Tom Cruise, this is Mission Impossible. And you know, and people think it's actually in many ways very hard to fix. So I have this full awareness about the situation, the organization, its dysfunctionality, its history, the good and the bad, and also fully aware of what it means for a member-driven organization and the value of the multilateral trading system. Because this means to me, if I put it into an equation, it is peace, prosperity, growth, not only for the nations, but also to everyone in these nations, small businesses, women, entrepreneurs. So unless the organization see this whole spectrum of the external environment and what the relevance of the organization is and how important it is to be the North Star, the direction for everybody who is a member and who will be joining, hopefully in the future, then any solution will be, one way or the other, half cooked. It's going to be temporarily. It's going to be simpler than the issue. So I'm approaching this potential opportunity from that awareness, which is very important at this point of time. So prior to my nomination, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as president of G20 have actually seen this as an important issue for the global trade, and through the agenda of G20, we've put a Riyadh track around the necessary reforms of the WTO. Although it's been there in Osaka and Buenos Aires and even previously, but we've elevated the discussion and we went into details, trying to get this political sense and consensus around these reforms, because it's very important. This is a ticket for the future to really negotiate with leaders around their commitment to these reforms through this G20. And then we had the resignation of the Director General, and I put my hand up, say, listen, I've worked into this file and my background is mixed, 25 years, as you said, in the private sector, but particularly global banks. So I've worked with JP Morgan and HSBC for 25 years, only these two institutions, different parts of the world, different regulators. And to me, to be the CEO of Middle East, Africa, and Turkey, I can understand what conflict is. It's a very tough region. And, sometimes viewpoints are very, very different. The portfolio was mixed, complex, with very ambitious targets. So that's the kind of experience I've been through in the private sector in terms of dealing with complexities, but also be able to provide solutions and reforms all the time. Trade was also core to the global banking, as you all know. Trade finance today is an issue. And unless you understand the dynamics of why it's blocked and what is the benefit and how it impacts corridors and how it impacts even, growth in the world, this aspect is very important. Besides the accountability, merit, performance, delivery, attention to the stakeholders' needs, which is a discipline. Someone has been brought up to do this. I've also worked in the government, as you said, as Minister of Economy and Planning, but it's not a regular job. This job was to design a reform of a G20 country like Saudi Arabia, depends on fuel and oil, to diversify an economy strategically, opening a new sector, empowering private sector, women, SMEs, connect 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and Africa, and have a very ambitious agenda. So in my second life as a politician and a policymaker, I was the person who's always neutral, trying to put 480 stakeholders on the table and achieve objectives and reforms all the time. My idea of reform is that it should be a continuous process. I haven't seen a reform succeeding if it's done once. And for the WTO, this is more important than ever. It's more urgent than ever. But anyone who takes this job should have the reform as a continuous agenda of the organization. Because we don't know in 10 years, in 20 years, how the world will evolve. Every indication we have today suggests that it's going to probably get worse before it gets better. So how the organization should be dynamic, agile, fit, and connected to the reality of our markets is very important. You know, this connectivity to the real economies, to the reality of the social life, to the tensions that is arising every day is very important. So you're right, regaining trust and confidence to the organization is top priority. But prior to that, there are few prerequisites that needs to be done. I understand that a lot of work and success has been done in the organization, although very slow and the output is very limited. But because of this external environment, because of this big ambitious to reform strategically and continuously, because of the deep issues within the organization, whether you look at the negotiation function, the disputes, notification, transparency, and their impact, I think it's very wise as any practical leader who really has done reforms is to look into the root causes of everything that's happening. Ask the big question, why? And many whys. Why are we into this position of dysfunctional negotiation? Why people are not notifying on time? Why the appellate body is in crisis? What led to it? You know, with live challenge, we should bring the challenge to live. The objective is to segregate the political beast in the organization, but also find out if there are real technical issues that is blocking progress. And if we can do that, then the Director General, in my view, should really split his mind. You know, he should really wear two hats. The first hat is his ability to reach out to members, especially the big players. And I here refer to US and China. So this ability needs someone where both can listen to. And again, coming from where I come from, G20, point of gravity, always the kingdom have connected East and West. And proximity to Africa, I understand their agenda. I've led this region for many years. You know, one of our objectives, as I said, is to connect Africa with Europe and Asia. We actually start building bridges to help the African development agenda. Also, we have a dedicated fund, for example. It's 42 years old and fully dedicated to, you know, least developed countries, vulnerable countries in Africa and different parts of the world, including some in Latin America. So I still the vice chairman and I still run this operation as we speak. So I think it's very important to have this political ability to reach out with a lot of power and you know, I would say reason to do so, but more importantly, how to strategize the bridging of the gaps. I hear people all the time saying, I will bridge the gap between the US and China. So how are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? Or she is going to do it? This is a strategy. This is not about knocking the door and talking. What I mean by strategy is we should understand the American mindset and understand the Chinese mindset. So I've worked in Hong Kong, Shanghai Banking Corporation for 20 years. I've seen the China economy grow from very, very low numbers to where it is now. And to me also the Chinese business, the Chinese region, or all the countries around it is part of the issue. Same for the US. We need to understand the US business mindset, how they approach the multilateral trading system, what it means for them. So what I mean by strategizing this gap, I think we should first of all say, what is the expected outcome in year X? And then work toward it and really make progress on a regular basis. So this reach out must be rigorous and multiple dimension. You cannot just go to one person and say, this is the issue, this is what we think. And feed that with a lot of scenarios. Tell China what it means for their growth. If this continues, tell the US what it means for their business. If this continues, the objective is to bring them back to the negotiation in the WTO. So That is very important after we do the deep dive, I think, root cause analysis, and then have this reach out program. The Director General should really spend a lot of time there, and then take few things, few files, you're very close to them, agriculture, fishery subsidies, e-commerce, trade facilitation. This should be really finished, because unless we provide members with evidence that there is progress, unless we provide the stakeholders, the community of global trade, there is progress, then I'm afraid reforms will not have value. People need to see evidence that we are progressing. An opportunity like the ministerial conference in June next year, maybe Corona helped with this delay, so we can have more time to prepare, more time to be more effective, more time to have a better outcome, more time to design feedback loops into the organization. Also, I don't think the solution to the WTO should be specific to the WTO or global trade, because this is an integrated, complex problem. And any wise, practical person will say, where can I tap into? What is the universe? You know, other international institutions can definitely help. NGOs help, private sector help. Members themselves, there has been great solutions, natural solutions for some of the issues. We need to ask why they haven't been implemented, and then try to really use the negotiation after we fix the process to really take these solutions into place. You know, ideas like the green room is not functional, or it's been for some time now not live. We should probably bring it back to life, but more, we need this innovation into the solutions. So after we do this, I think we can summarize it by saying the Director General is the person who can strike that balance between the political outreach, bring people back to the table. At the same time, he is the reformer who address the issues within the organization, and he should keep this striking of the balance continuous. That's my first priority, is to really go there and engage all the stakeholders and strengthening this transparency, do quick wins, you know, use digital within the organizations more effectively to really facilitate processes within the WTO. But also the Director General Office, is it enough? Is this size enough? Do you need more technical expertise? What kind? For me, maybe a legal, dynamic function should be there. Maybe a chief operating officer, someone who really follow process, feedback, performance is there. The delivery, the solutions, we need to design them also. So what you will expect from someone like me, who's pragmatic, leader, pro-delivery, for members' goals, is to get things done and really move agendas forward. After we do that, I hope before the ministerial conference or within a year, then we go to the medium-term vision, the medium-term strategy. Here we ask, how do we really connect to the real economies? Is it a question of another round, change of the rules, if members want to? You know, the digital trade, how it's impacting all of us. And maybe by then we will have more visibility on COVID and have more answers if a vaccine is there, how the world will look like and what's the impact on trade, what's the correlation between trade and the environment. All these issues are medium term after we do the first impact of recovery, of stabilizing the firm, the organization, of really bringing back some of the trust that was missing. If we do that medium term, it will lead us to the very, very long term vision, which is the relevance of the organization. Maybe members see WTO 3.0, maybe use this plurilateral system as a journey toward the multilateral system. And here, hopefully, we can ask much bigger questions, bolder in a way. So in summary, because I am really interested to hear your questions and engage with you, in summary, the question to me about the person is practicality of leadership, that means ability to deliver. Also, understanding the complexity of the challenge of the organization at this point of time, including the external environment, ability to reach out and understand the smaller country vulnerability equally as he understands or she understands the big countries' concerns and issues. Things like the S&D treatment, maybe we should have a political dialogue about it. It's something we should address in a way that we talk about the flexibilities, we talk about the exceptions, we talk about the impact, what it means for growth, what it means for prosperity and continuity of the global trading system. So the vision, after we do the prerequisites, the impact and address the headwinds and the game changer in the medium term, should really say in 10 years, in 20 years, this organization is self-correcting, it is a continuous reform, it's relevant to every stakeholder, members, private sector, the community, everybody, but more importantly, connected to the reality and the real economies of the world. So, Alejandro, this is my initial brief, but more importantly, please, I like to engage and ask and answer questions.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that presentation. I think it's been very thorough, and probably you have, in doing so, answered many of the questions we have anticipated. So thank you. And I remind participants, particularly those who have joined recently, that feel free to ask any questions, and you may do so by using the chat function of this event. Minister, as you have intimated, you have spoken about a continuous process of reform or adaptation to new circumstances. You have rightly, I think, pointed out the fact that it's we face great unknowns. We don't know what the world will be in a few years' time, and in that respect, I'd like to inquire from you, from your point of view, in terms of the message you might give members. What are the necessary steps to initiate that process of reform in the WTO, and how to sustain it over the longer term, and based on something that you also pointed out on the assumption that some degree of trust will be restored to the WTO. Over to you.
Thank you very much. You've mentioned a very important word, which is sustainability of the reforms, and that can only be done through careful listening to members, their goals, their concerns, their sensitivities, and there is multiple of striking balances, multiple issues where the DG should strike that balance. So defining that optimal points in each negotiation is key, where people can give and take, but they see value. That's striking a balance. And that requires engagement, active listening, follow up in the implementation if people agree, if members agree. So I think that culture is definitely a factor that will help in the reform agenda that I'm bringing. So what you will see from someone like me is this careful listening about sensitivity and issues, because what I need to achieve is the following. I want people to believe in the reform, and this is not easy. Please ask all the candidates, when was the last time they faced resistance and to change in their life? So I'm facing it as I speak. I'm dealing with, youth, religious people, very bureaucrats, a lot of stakeholders who doesn't want change because it doesn't help them, corruption. I'm dealing with all of these people who resist change. So there is a bit, my second point is there is a bit of courage required to insist and convince, use data to implement cultural change. So after the careful listening of the reforms and really try to find optimal points, is this ability, hopefully, to consistently implement, consistently deliver. Third, as I said, we have to use innovation, digital creativity to get things done, even if they are small. But once people see the ball rolling and start to really see things are progressing, I think the WTO is unique. There is no another WTO. So people in their deep conscious know that this entity here to stay, even the difficult ones. The question is, how do we bring it back to life? How do we bring back relevance to it? So once we achieve that portfolio of consistency, careful listening, delivery, I think we can talk about, with members, about what is it that they see as a major game changer going forward. And this is when I talk about continuous reform. So convince and then really talk about the very bold, difficult challenges. Please.
Thank you. Related to what just said, you said, listen carefully to find the optimal point where members can identify the value, and in order to do so, use the data. And you've mentioned twice the word digital. In this context, I'd like to seek your views on transparency, something which is notoriously deficient in the system, as far as it relies on members' initiative to notify their trade measures under the obligations of a covered agreement. So, and related to this is also the fact that the smaller, weaker members of the organization have less resources to engage and to see the value and to process information. So in this context, what you said, what do you see as the role of the Secretariat? What can the Secretariat led by the Director General do to improve this situation?
So a few points here, Alejandro. I think one is the impact of not having the transparency to standards. I think this is the worst enemy to predictability, to investment, to be able to really attract any investment. And I know it's particularly important for Latin America to really attract investment. So without this predictability, it's going to be very, very tough. So this awareness is important. Maybe we need to elaborate and be more vocal about it. And when I say impact, please tell me what it means. So quantify it as well. So people don't take it lightly. I think the Secretariat can do that, and they can do it easily. Second, we should really dig deep and understand why people are not notifying on time. And if it's a technical challenge, we should really fulfill that gap. But we should eliminate, if it's a technical change, we should eliminate. If it's political, then I can assure you that there is a role where the Director General can play to reach out to the prime ministers, to the decision makers, and say, this is the issue and this is the impact, and really be proactive about it. So technical assistance should be eliminated if it's the root cause, and then the Director General can, and the Secretariat can help. Third, you mentioned the role of the Secretariat. And to me, I think there is a discipline there, which is very important. Follow-up, monitoring. We can definitely use the digital solutions to be able to do that. And maybe even share some of these informations in different forums. So I don't want to say punishment. I'm not privileged to say this at this point of time, but if this was a business, you have to really go and say, this is dangerous. It's actually have a very big consequences. So we will work with solutions using digital, using more forums, using the organizational communication channels. And by the way, I think communication by itself is a challenge within the organization. That's my reading from engagement the last couple of months. You know, the way people communicate and the efficiency, effectiveness of this communication is a challenge. So we need to also look at that, because then we can use something like the digital world through a more communication that's enhanced to really deliver the message of the lack of transparency.
Thank you, Minister. Now, two questions from William Ellers. One is in the plan that you outlined, from your point of view, is decision-making by consensus, and the fact that we have used the approach of single undertaking to negotiations, is consensus and the single taken, are they a help or a hindrance to the smooth functioning of the system? And his second question is, how do we get the dispute settlement system back on track? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Look, as I said in my introduction, the design of the organization, consensus, member-driven, is very difficult. This is the reality, and this is something we have to address. But this is what members agreed to as well. So I think my job will be to really strike this balance and achieve consensus, but through a lot of deep negotiation and a lot of give and take, a lot of scenario analysis, and really try to bring people to the table, bridging gaps as much as possible. So this is the design of the organization, and members have chosen this way. It's very difficult, but we can work around ideas and solutions to make it more effective. At least this is my impression at this point of time. Now, for the dispute settlement, you know, the Director General personally have no influence directly to settle disputes or to judge. You know, he's working for everybody equally and try to facilitate and help. But if there is a procedural improvement, if there is a potential of improving the interpretations of some of the rules, then definitely the Secretariat can work with members around that. I've seen the European temporary solution, the David Walker solution. The question is why they haven't been implemented. And the root cause of this large number of disputes is the function of negotiation. So that's why I keep coming back to it. This is the core. If we fix that heart of the organization, then believe me, the other two functions will be easier in many ways to fix, because this is where everything happens. When I say fix the negotiation, is there a process to read the early warning signs of negotiation? You know, there is no cliffs. You and I, if we negotiate about dinner tomorrow, we will dispute. Yeah, unless we really agree that it's Chinese that we like to have, or you know, something. So you should read really between the lines and early warning signs, not to have cliffs. Deadlines is also another discipline that I'm used to. You know, we should probably think about negotiation should not take more than X or Y number of months. Also, informal negotiation, one way of really asking people to engage informally so we can do some bridging, is something we should bring back to the table and use it more effectively. But, you know, about the dispute settlement, the question is, how can we work around it? And members then decide how they want to proceed.
Thank you very much, Minister. As far as dinner is concerned, I'm sure we can agree. I'll eat whatever you want to
Me too.
have for dinner.
So
we may have a disagreement on what we're going to drink with dinner, but that's different.
Amazing.
Paulina Nasal asks the question, She points out, as you mentioned, the economic recovery is the first and most important task. And in this context, she asks, how could the WTO work in a more coordinated manner with other international organizations through concrete actions, and in particularly, how to achieve this recovery with SMEs and women entrepreneurs, since those two, SMEs and women, are usually more affected than the average, and that the WTO has maybe not really reached out effectively at these sectors.
You know, my very deep feeling is that my ultimate beneficiary is a woman in entrepreneur in Latin America or Asia or Africa. This is, you know, the entity, the person that I think about when I think of reforms. Because unless I really go there and connect with that unit, then, you know, we will not really be serving our noble principles and causes and original goals. So I hear you loud and clear, and I'm totally aligned. Now, the economic recovery this time around, and I go back to my 30 years history, when I see the Asian crisis, 97 started in Thailand, it was currencies and leverage, and then go to LTCM, 2000, Argentina default, I go to 2007, credit crisis in the US. I was in New York at that time, and I saw the collapse of the financial institutions, etc., etc. So all these crises is nothing compared to what we face now, nothing. Because this one hit us all at the same time. It came with a huge geopolitical tension. There are actually a lot of residuals from the past that was not resolved. There are very little tools for us to help in the recovery, apart from, you know, these stimulus packages that we keep coming up with. Today, Europe had, France, 100 billion euros, Saudi Arabia, $55 billion. You know, this is our best to try to navigate and help those who are impacted by COVID. The question is, we don't know whether it's enough. How long will COVID stay with us? Do we need to do more? And was it really targeted at the affected businesses and hasn't been abused? So let's agree that the situation today is very, very tricky, unprecedented, and very few of us can have the imagination to say, how are we going to recover? Here comes the relevance of the WTO, because people are desperate. That's why I say it is a window of opportunity to really push the reform agenda, to really push the importance of the organization, to really bring back people to the negotiation, because there are fear outside, a lot of fears outside. So I think the Director General should really bridge that gap very quickly. And you're right, working with other international institutions should be priority, because if we really understand the significance of the issue, we cannot do it alone. WTO cannot do it alone. There are labor issues. Unemployment is everywhere. SMEs globally are suffering. Bankruptcies are at record globally. And more importantly, uncertainty in this market will discourage people from startup again. So we need to bring back confidence, not only to global trade, but to the global economies. And here is the opportunity. Where can we really draw this picture, scenarios of this recovery, you know, how it works, and what is the role of the organization? How important is this rules-based system that will discipline everybody at the same time, bring predictability and certainty to the market. So I am very keen to really work with other international institutions, who I know also, and be part of the global solution at the same time, fix the WTO. And also, you haven't talked about the private sector. I think their voice is also very important. It's critical to listen to the beneficiaries of global trade, people who actually deliver goods and services. I think that's also a very important link we should work toward achieving.
Thank you. In that context, you've mentioned other international agencies in the private sector, and I have a good question in this respect from Dorotea Lopez, who is the director of the Institute of International Relations of the University of Chile, a very powerful and prestigious institute. And she asked the question, what is, of your opinion, of the link between the academia and the WTO?
So when I look at the history of the organization, 25 years after GATT, it was created based on some, I don't know, like-minded people who had really thought about the necessary entity to really help facilitate this multilateral trading system and rules-based where everybody can see a level playing field. I think, look at the 25 years history, the role of academia has also evolved significantly. I think initially there was some roles for them, but the organization did not catch up with the research and development capabilities that's globally available now. You know, talk about the relationship between trade and the environment. It's significant. And the unified definition of digital trading is significant. So academia, actually research is very important to see and hear and engage with them because they have the edge, in my view. And it's very important for an organization with this size, with this mandate, to engage with them to see the value of research into the policies, into the rules. And if we are serious about reforms, I tell you, and I've said this, maybe I did not mention the research and the academia, but everybody should be part of it. Everybody, members, unions, other international institutes, academia, for sure, research. But you see, the organization did not really catch up with the development, impressive development of the research work.
Thank you very much. I have a question from Mr. Sandoval, Felipe Sandoval, and it's how to deal with a growing distancing between China and the United States. Some people would say decoupling. And this in the context of growing plurilateralism within and outside the WTO framework. How can the WTO embrace the plurilateral efforts that are being made without undermining itself as a multilateral institution?
That's another balance the organization should strike. That's the connection to reality. That's why we need reforms. That's why it is only this window of opportunity. Unless we grab it because of the uncertainty and COVID, then I am sure all of us will be talking about something else in a few years' time. So I've tackled the US and China around the ability to reach out and the strategy or strategizing this gap narrowing between them, you know, using every dimension available, but making progress and do it continuously and rigorously. Also use member solutions to really fill this gap if available. Also measure progress and success, what it means, measure outcome, use the ministerial conference, use any tool available. But once they see that spirit, I mean, we've seen it in the G20. When we talked with China and the US in the G20, both of them agree that there is a need to reform. To me, this is very encouraging as an optimistic person. Also, the fact that they managed phase one to talk about, you know, amounts and dollars of trade, I think it's also encouraging. That means we can leverage into these opportunities and the global networks to really bring them back to the negotiation. Now, the reality also that plurilaterals are all over the place and people got there because they're either desperate to make progress or they gave up on the multilateral trading system. So the question is, how do we benefit from these toward the journey toward multilateral trading system? But there are also question marks. For example, sometimes people don't join plurilateral agreements, although they can through most favored nation. We need to ask the question why. Why do they not join? And is it political? And here is the root cause analysis that I started with. It's very important. This is one of the questions we need to ask. But I see them as one way, a tool toward the multilateral trading system. So another striking of the balance between reality and then how to keep the integrity of the multilateral trading system.
Thank you very much. We are getting closer to our allotted time. Another question, what would be the 3-5 actions, steps you would take in your first 100 days in office?
So, you know, that's a classic question to me. I think if I put in words, you know, it's easier for you to get my mindset. So 100 days, there must be an impact. People should see an impact. And when I say by impact, you know, whether it is a action that tells people, here is what we are going to do, like this deep dive root cause analysis, definitely. Second word is evidence. I think people in the first 100 days need to see evidence. Whether I, you know, make a change in the Secretariat, whether I really have the US making a statement of potentially coming back to the organization, but people need to see evidence. So I work on that evidence for people to trust the organization again. We should also start the engagement with members immediately. When I say that, I think, you know, the environment today, as I see it, is a bit lost, especially with no director general. And, you know, the spirit of the organization is stalling. So we need to make sure that communication is addressed immediately. They should see the Secretariat, the Director General approaching and listening to the members very quickly. But, you know, we should also, in the first 100 days, identify the key messages. What is it, the key messages? I remember in my banking days when we put this very comprehensive strategies and people got lost. But when we narrow it down to 3, improve revenues, cut cost, implement global standards, everybody start to know it. So maybe come up with 3 to 5 messages that gives people an idea, a feeling of what's coming. You know, this helps with culture change. It helps with the, you know, hope, bring hope back to the organization. And finally, I will definitely go to the negotiation function. I think there is the starting point where we can really work on what is a hot file that needs to be progressed and improved. But what you should expect in 100 days after they finish, and I don't think 100 days really, I think 100 hours, because things are happening by the hour now, not by days. And maybe I should have even started now. In my trip to the US, I was able to really engage, ask tough questions, bold questions. I think we should really, all of us, start now, including you, because every minute we lose is going to make it harder for the future. But hopefully before 100 days, you should feel, members should feel that this is happening finally. And of course, continuous analysis of COVID-19, work with members around the recovery, and send messages that the organization is back into the real world.
Thank you very much. Maybe one should clarify 100 working hours, because one doesn't want to deprive the Director General.
I tell you here in the kingdom, I have seen ministers and myself do 30, 40 hours continuously at the beginning. Okay. Yes, at the beginning, not now. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's sustainable. But, you know, we were very serious about putting a plan together. And, you know, we were sleeping on couches and taken short naps for days and weeks initially because we were serious about the reform.
Minister, one last question, and then two last questions really before we bring this to a closure. One from Jonathan Freed. What you've touched upon this in your remarks 2 or 3 times. What are your views of plurilaterals within the WTO? For example, e-commerce.
My view is very simple. I think, you know, if it leads to a bigger progress, if it leads to a bigger solution toward multilateral system, then we will definitely encourage it and encourage members to join. For e-commerce, it's a bit tricky because it's a game changer. The organization had, you know, a special track in 1998, and they were ahead of the curve, but nothing really happened. I don't know how an organization wants to lead such a big initiative like this, and internally, they still haven't used the digital platform more effectively. So the gap is big, and there is no unified definition. And I generally say that if it's leading toward a bigger solution, multilateral trading solution, then I will encourage it and support it.
Thank you. And last is, I can't resist this. It's really from me because you've spoken about, and it's not really related to your candidature, but it will be interesting to know about what your experience has been. You've mentioned a reform in the kingdom and the idea of diversification of its economy, etc. This, of course, it's never an easy task, and we'd like to know what has been what the process has been like, and what are the results that are coming out.
So you need to listen to me for the next 7 hours if you have time. No, I'll try to do it in 3 minutes. So this was in many ways a top-down idea, but it was delivered bottom-up. So what we've done initially, we've put 7,000 people in a camp. They are a mix of university students, professors, business community, entrepreneurs, subject matter experts, expat community, name it, 7,000 people for good 4 months, 120 days. And we asked them all sorts of questions, call it, name it, whatever, potential of the country, where are the gaps, frustrations, difficulties, legal infrastructure, the benchmarking. So this was the initial thinking because we wanted this to really be real and connected to the world. And then based on that input, we've also put a lot of scenarios on how we want to deliver this. So you know how dependent on oil our country is. Almost at that point of time, almost 80% of our revenues were coming from oil and oil sector. So we said, what we mean by diversification, and how long will it take us to reduce this dependency from X to Y, and so on. We start with these design of the goals. So we had 96 goals agreed, and then those goals were converted into objectives, and then those objectives into specific actions, and they were designed into 12 programs. 12 programs. So I chair, for example, the National Transformation Program. This is where you see now with COVID, you can hold your mobile, dial a number, you will be online with the doctor, and he will advise you on what to do. Schools today, we've built a great digital infrastructure. We have 7 million students go to school today online because we've done it. We thought this is important, and this national transformation serves the consumers, the citizens. It will take you now 3 minutes to issue a passport in Saudi Arabia. 3 minutes. To renew or issue a new passport. 3 minutes. We stopped corruption, we saved money, and 98% of our government services are digital. So that was also a national transformation program. It was an objective to reach 100% e-government. Now we are 98. Ease of doing business. You know, we are #1 globally this year in terms of ease of doing business, reforms, women empowerment in business, #1 globally. Again, we had all these objectives through this basic design, and we put a lot of scenarios around oil at 80, at 60, at 30, and how we are going to cope. So when COVID hits and oil price drop, we immediately pull the kit of the worst case scenario and we start implementing it. Today, our Minister of Finance was live on TV to update the communities, and he said, this is what we've spent, this is how much reserve we have, this is our debt to GDP because we borrowed money, this is. So transparency was a big thing for us, and we mean business, because now business can predict. So the Vision 2030 is all about, really the essence of it is diversification, but through transparent process, dynamic government, and being able to deliver. I hope I can bring some of that discipline also live to the WTO, because it has a lot of policy formation, a lot of conflicting priorities, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of resistance to change. So far so good. This is 5 years down the road. We still have 10 years to go. And hopefully you will all see the impact of our opening up, of our role in the global community, of our engagement with the markets. You know, our markets now is top 5 globally. It's the biggest economy in our region, but also opening a new sector like tourism, hospitality, culture. And there has been a lot of fights, believe me, in the last 5 years. This is not easy. But seeing is believing. So I invite everybody on this call to be my guest, our guest, to come to Saudi. Now it will take you 3 minutes to have an online visa, which is again unprecedented in my part of the world. Please come see this change yourself. So I hope I can bring some of that to the WTO.
Minister, thank you very much. We've gone beyond our time. I think that on that last question, I congratulate myself that I had the instinct to ask you the question. I congratulate you on this process of reform. I think it's a very important experience. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the group of Punta del Este and of the friends of the group for your presentation and the approach you've taken to answer our questions, your openness and your frankness. I think this is extremely helpful to all of us to be better informed about your person, about your ideas and your skills with a view to becoming Director General of the WTO. So having said that, many thanks, and we wish you well.
Thank you very much for all of you, for your questions, engagements, and I repeat what I started with, the world needs people like you everywhere, in every aspect of our lives. So thank you, really. Don't thank me, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.